Minister of the Federal Capital Territory, as well as the Nigerian police force. They've called on residents to remain calm as security agencies are working to maintain law and order in the nation's capital. This follows the alert issued by the United States over the risk of terror attacks in Nigeria, especially in the Federal Capital Territory. The alert said terrorists may target government buildings, places of worship, schools, and markets. The United Kingdom and Canada had on Monday communicated the terrorism alerts to their citizens in Nigeria. In a statement, however, the Director of Information and Communication of the Federal Capital Territory, Mohammed Sule, assured residents that all necessary arrangements have been made to safeguard their lives and their property. Security expert Kabir Adamu joins us now for a thorough analysis of the security situation in Abuja in regards to this panic button being pressed by the United States in Nigeria. Good afternoon, Dr. Adamu. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure, Howard. Good afternoon. Tamitope, good afternoon.
Well, we unfortunately meet again under circumstances that aren't the best, but this time it's a warning and we aren't, it's not the after effects of an actual attack. What do you make of the United States' alert, the fact that a lot of embassies as well are complying and shutting down? Schools are going virtual. It seems everyone is taking this alert quite seriously. What do you make of the threats?
Okay, so two separate things. First off, the threats, and then the American embassy. Now, as you probably are aware, the U.S. is leading the global campaign against terrorism, and this followed 9/11, and their attempt to bring countries together to galvanize efforts against terrorism. Now, when such a country releases any terror alert, the likelihood is that the entire world would heed that alert, for the simple reason that 9/11 shook the world. And then, of course, the efforts that followed 9/11 are still very fresh in our minds. Now, that's the response. In terms of the threat, what do we know about the threat to Abuja? We know that, for instance, that as far back as 2014, well, let's even go back to 2012, 2013, when we recorded bombing incidents here in Abuja up to 2014 and then 2015. And then since then, we've not recorded any terror incident in terms of an attack in Abuja. Now, it can be argued that the Kuje incident, the terror incident, the circumstances are slightly different. They targeted a custodial center and then released captives that were in that custodial center. It's different from going to a supermarket or a transportation hub and setting off a bomb, which is what happened in 2014 and 2015. So to that extent, it appears some semblance of stability had been regained within the Federal Capital Territory. But that does not eliminate the threat completely. The fact that Abuja is a federal capital, the fact that it hosts several what I would describe as likely targets and potential targets for terrorist attack means, for instance, that Abuja would continuously remain in the side of terror groups. But on the other hand, we also know that the security forces have increased their counter-terrorism campaign in Abuja. If you pick the FCT administration as an example, it launched what it called the G7 operations. That G7 operation is an operation combining forces from within Abuja, the Guards Brigade, and then from the neighboring states of Kogi, Nasarawa, Kaduna, and I think Niger State, as well as Plateau State and one other state. That operation has been ongoing. We've seen several interdiction exercises within the 6 consuls of the FCT Abuja. Then the several other security departments, the SSS, the military, name them, they've been carrying out different operations, some of them singly or in task forces. And so to an extent, that stability has maintained. Now, that alert coming in the midst of all of this effort that I've mentioned has given rise to questions. For instance, one of the questions that is currently ongoing is if the US is in possession of an intelligence Did it share that intelligence with the Nigerian security agencies, or it just went out and released the alert that it released? If that is the case, what is the objective? Is the objective targeted at sensitizing its citizens that are in Nigeria, or are there other objectives, especially in light of the fact that we're in a pre-election year? And if you recall, in 2014, security was used as a reason for winning and losing the election. In 2019, the same, and in 2023, that is likely to happen. So that's kind of the kind of questions in my mind at the moment with all of this development, especially given the fact that the 3 government departments that have reacted to that US alert, as it were, never at any point in time, if you go through the responses, they did not acknowledge the fact that they were privy to the intelligence that the US shared. They only took, they acknowledged the alert and indicated that it would be part of their feat for intelligence, and then, of course, went ahead to reassure citizens within Abuja and other residents of the FCT that they should go about their normal business. Now, in my professional view, I'm trying to summarize everything I've said. There is a threat in Abuja. That threat is still, active, and that we should continue our operation, having at the back of my mind that Abuja remains a likely target, but that there is active security presence in Abuja to deter any likely occurrence at the moment.
So, Dr. Adamu, what does this terror alert say about our own intelligence gathering mechanism, since obviously our security agencies missed it? And then also, what do you make of the response so far to this terror alert? Is it enough to forestall a possible attack?
Well, first off, there is a question regarding the veracity of the intelligence. A good intelligence usually answers the 5 imperatives of who, what, when, where, and how. In this instance, even from sources within, close to the authors of that alert, those imperatives have not been answered. For instance, they don't know if it's an individual, they don't know if it's a group. So it raises the question, what kind of intelligence did they have before they released that? And I've also mentioned that the Nigerian security forces were not privy to that intelligence. So when we say, for instance, that the Nigerian security or intelligence departments are not aware, perhaps it's because there is no intelligence, or if at all there is an intelligence, it's not a grassroots intelligence. The imperative of a good intelligence would suggest, for instance, that it was based on an information that was gathered from someone, and that the likelihood of it being an actionable intelligence, in other words, you know who it is, you know what the person intends to do, and more importantly, you know the method that the attacker is likely to use. And that means law enforcement agents can take steps to prevent that from happening. Now, the entire scenario does not indicate that that is the situation we have at the moment. So what do we do in such an instance? What do other countries do, given the precepts that have been provided by international law and international relations? We invite the American ambassador. The US is a friendly country. We've got liaison arrangements with the US. So we invite him through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and we ask him in a formal way, please share with us this intelligence. And if we are convinced that they're in possession of such an intelligence, we leave it at that. But if it turns out on the basis of that invitation that there is no basis for the release of that alert, then we perhaps invite the entire diplomatic community through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and remind them that we're in a pre-election year, and that alerts like that would have consequences not just on the safety and security, but also on the election. And so they should be mindful going forward. When they have such information, they should share it with Nigerian security departments. And this is the norm in diplomatic practice.
You said a lot, Dr. Kabir, but when I think about security alerts historically, and well, from where I grew up, it usually is around. It usually indicates that something might happen, an event, not the actual attack itself, but an event is coming up, maybe a holiday or a trial, or something might be the catalyst that might spark the unrest that might come in future. So in thinking about that, apart from the fact that it's a pre-election year, what are the events that are happening within Nigeria or Abuja specifically that could spark such activity to have bandits or terrorists gather enough for the U.S. to pick up on intelligence that they have movement? And in thinking, the only two events that come to mind, and I'm not sure if I'm adding too much, if I'm making too much of a correlation of this, is the trial of Nnamdi Kanu that has been ongoing and we know has been followed with spates of violence, not particularly in Abuja, but definitely in the east, and also these floods that we've been having. We know that it's devastation that has taken over about 3/4 of the country. We know people's lives and homes have been put underwater. But the effects, other than the health effects, I'm not sure if these kinds of things increase the amount of non-state activity by individuals. And those are the only two situations that come to mind. Am I putting too much into it? And is this the way we should be thinking? When events are coming up, we should all maybe just get a little more secure without even having a security alert being put out. We should also keep in mind that, you know, it's a pre-election year and things tend to get volatile. Your thoughts on that?
No, definitely. And I can assure you that the Nigerian Security Department are doing that. They are, I mean, one of the greatest incentives for a terror attack at the moment is the elections. There are different groups that would be happy, as an example, to show, for instance, that there is a failure in security, and of course it would serve different purposes vis-a-vis the election. Last year, President Buhari did issue a statement where he admitted to the fact that politicians have weaponized insecurity. And unfortunately, that is a fact currently in Nigeria. Earlier on in my statement, I mentioned that in 2014, 2015, and now, 2014, 2015, 2019, and now in 2023, security is likely to be a determinant of the outcome of the election. So any attack in Abuja at the moment will serve the purposes of those who have weaponized insecurity. If we start looking at the threat elements within Nigeria, then yes, you're right. The trial of Nnamdi Kanu, the fact that the court has asked that he should be released, and the fact that he's not been released is an incentive. An incentive, a push, as well as a pull incentive. Those who are unhappy that the government have not released him would have the incentive to perhaps engineer or carry out such an attack. Those who don't want him to be released would also have that incentive. Then the terror groups that exist in Nigeria, the Islamic State in West Africa province, the Jamaat al-Ahli al-Dawat wal-Jihad, the bandit groups, name them, all have an incentive to show in terms of their prevalence and their capacity to carry out an attack in Abuja. That too is another incentive. Then let's not forget the last group, which is the political elements who, for one reason or the other, would want to sway the outcome of the elections. And those would include local political pressure groups, as well as international pressure groups. If you look at what happened in Kenya, the three components of intelligence, misinformation, disinformation, and propaganda, played a huge role in the outcome of the Kenyan elections. The good thing is that it never led to any violence. And so we know that in Nigeria too, that is likely to happen. And we also know that there are foreign interests, ranging from the US down to China, as well as Russia, that would have huge interest in the outcome of the 2023 elections in Nigeria. So all of these are issues that we need to put the best generals, the best security practitioners in a, forgive my use of the word war room, but that's exactly what we should have. We should have a war room where the best of our experts would sit down and be monitoring all of these things I've mentioned with scenarios. The scenarios would talk about what if, for instance, this threat alert is genuine? What if, for instance, it's not genuine? What would be the purpose? That's what a war room should do. Scenario A, scenario B, and then the possible outcomes of each of these scenarios. And then more importantly, what mitigation measures can we put in place if all of these scenarios play out? But having said all of that, let me not take away the fact that each country has a responsibility towards its citizens. In other words, Nigeria, and that was proven over the weekend when the Diaspora Commission released a travel advisory for Cyprus. That is a responsibility to citizens. It's a travel advisory. Now, if the US releases a travel advisory to its citizens, that's fine. But my point is that on the basis of diplomatic relationships and on the basis of the liaison agreement that we have with the US, if they are privy to intelligence, then they are almost obliged to share that intelligence with us.
So, Dr. Adamu, looking at all the facts on ground now, we know that the military has heightened its war on terror. You've said it that politicians, that they are taking advantage of insecurity to try to influence poll results or to manipulate the 2023 elections. And then, of course, this terror alerts coming from the U.S. Embassy. Would you say that Nigeria is prepared for the 2023 elections security-wise, or are there other security measures that must be put in place before the elections kick off in February 2023?
So it's work in progress. As I am aware that the Independent National Electoral Commission has conducted a risk assessment. It has one of the most modern risk assessment tools. It was provided by an European institution, and as far as I know, they use that tool. INEC has an enterprise risk management department, and every time a major event like an election is coming up, that department conducts a risk assessment. And to the best of my knowledge, they have shared the outcome of that risk assessment with the committee that is responsible for security within the electoral process. And that committee is called the Interagency Consultative Committee on Election Security. It's a committee that is co-chaired by the Inspector General of Police as well as the National Security Advisor. So that is the second level of risk management that is conducted. Each of these agencies, including the Inspector General of Police, the National Security Advisor, and then all the other 22 members of this ICES, the Interagency Consultative Committee on Election Security, would also conduct their risk management functions. And once they conduct all of this risk management, they would hopefully identify the threat factors. They would identify the incentives for these threat factors, identify vulnerabilities, and then evaluate these vulnerabilities and then put in place mitigation measures. So as an example, I know that the Inspector General of Police conducted training at the regional level where he harnessed the input of all the AIGs at the regional level, and that has been formed into some form of structure that would lead into the elections. I'm also aware that the military, the Chief of Defense Staff, the Chief of Army Staff, and the several other service chiefs, they've also conducted similar arrangements at their organizational level. So all of this will be infused towards what would lead to the security management for the elections. The missing element there, and that's something I have spoken about in the past, and I would love to see that, is some form of M&E, monitoring and evaluation, that would allow us as citizens, you as the media, to know what these organizations are doing. The level of transparency at the moment is not so good. The second point is that a lot of this is happening at the federal level. I would like to see a situation where the functions of this committee, the Interagency Consultative Committee on Election Security, is taken down to the state level as well as the local government level. The enemies of the state that carry out these issues that circumvent the elections are not only at the federal level. A lot of them are at the state level, while the others are at the local government. So let's take down the functions of this committee to the state level as well as the local government level, so that we're able to harness the threat factors there, and then we're able to put in place mitigation measures against them. But in all of this, I think the singular and most important issue that would impact the security during the elections is the conduct of politicians themselves. And I'm very happy to note that the National Peace Committee has started very well. It has gotten politicians to sign some form of accord. Even though, unfortunately, immediately after signing the accord, most of them are not, living up to the expectations of that agreement. So we're hoping that going forward, they would do better. And we're also hoping that, the media, civil society organizations would be highlighting these breaches, as it were, or breaches to this peace accord, so that we do a name and shame thing. Perhaps it would reduce the tendency for them to abuse or, not comply with the accord that they signed.
Well, you know, Dr. Adamu, we have been highlighting, and it doesn't seem that they are stopping. That is not to encourage them to continue to breach the peace accord, but you know how these things go. Speaking for individual citizens in Abuja, some of them might have assumed, since most of the embassies and the government parastatals are in the city, that they would be less likely to have to come to terms with a threat situation like this. But now that the threat is out there, first of all, how long do you think the threat will last for, this threat alert, and what can individuals do to keep themselves more safe? Obviously, they have been asked to stay away from large gatherings, and we have already taken off the table that arming oneself is not the best of ideas. As a security expert, what are some other suggestions you have for families who might be a little more scared than normal in Abuja these days?
All right, thanks. And we have a mantra in security that we call either the AAA or the AAM. So I advise everyone listening to just pick up a paper and just write that mantra. It says awareness leads to anticipation, and then it leads to action. So that's the AAA. The last A can be changed to M. So you have AAM, and that when you do that, the M will now start to stand for mitigation. So that's what I would advise everybody in Nigeria, not just in Abuja. First off, be aware. And being aware with, just even listening to news. A lot of us, unfortunately, don't even listen to news. So let's start with that. Let's be listening to the news. If you are a corporate organization, sign up for, organizations like mine. We have an intelligence component where we share credible intelligence. I don't know if you've seen a copy of the report that we share. It's a weekly and as well as a monthly report. So corporate organizations should sign up for that. What it does is that it informs them of the real security issues, not just fake news as it were. So that's the number one component, be aware. Number two component is to anticipate. The natural tendency for all human beings is if you are aware, then you can anticipate the likelihood of what is going to happen. So let's say, for instance, you know that during the embark periods, there's an increase in crime activities, and you have this very expensive phone that you always, flash around when you are moving. If you're aware, the likelihood is that you're not going to be doing that. You probably are going to keep it away, or if you do decide to flash it, then maybe you do what logical human beings would do, insure that phone, knowing that it's likely to be stolen, so that once it's stolen, the insurance company will pay you. The last point is the mitigation measure. So if you can afford it, as an example, increase your security posture. Increasing your security posture would mean if you are an employer, look around your office. What are the vulnerabilities? Are you domiciled close to an embassy that you know is likely to be targeted? Are you domiciled close to, let's say, a motor park or places like that? What kind of security measures? Have you ever conducted any training for yourself and your staff? If you are a family member, have you ever done any drill exercises for your family? This is the time to do all of that. And I'm going to conclude by saying there are apps that are freely available online. There is the Citizens. Anyway, there are several apps that are available online that would help you in doing these three things that I've mentioned. So search for it. And then for anyone interested, again, there are security experts like myself who will be happy to take you through all of these measures that I've mentioned. At the end of the day, what is important is that we stay situationally aware. There are threat elements within our environment, and because we're in an election season, the likelihood for an attack as a result of that threat element is higher than it was before the election season. So we need to take responsibility for our personal security.
Security analyst Dr. Adamu, thank you so much for joining us on Newsday.